Again, greetings everyone. Welcome to this seminar. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are today. Today's webinar is focusing on influence of COVID-19, the pandemic, on the fourth industrial revolution trends. As a matter of fact, I feel like there is a symbiotic relationship between the fourth industrial revolution trends that influenced COVID. At the same time, COVID influenced the fourth industrial revolutions too. So I just want to talk about these aspects and lead you into today's webinar. So making sure. All right. So my name is Dr. Sriram Rajagopalan. I'm currently working as an enterprise agile evangelist with Inflectra Corporation. I have my doctoral degree in organizational leadership and a master's in business administration and a master's in computer engineering and a bachelorate in electronics and communication engineering. I've been in the IT field, started my career as a software engineer and then progressed along the continuum as a team leader, business analyst, project manager, scrum master, agile coach, and a director and vice president of program management office as well. I have a number of certifications in the training space as well as in the professional space, which includes personal agility recognized professional ambassador, Scrum ambassador, licensed trainer, portfolio management, program management, project management, risk management, agile, Scrum, and a number of other things. And I'm also an instructional designer, speaker, writer, and author. I have facilitation experience in a number of institutions across the US, India, UK, Canada, Switzerland, Brazil, and Vietnam as well. My book that was published is Organized Common Sense as to why project management principles apply to everyone, risk management, agile, and things of those things apply to everybody's life. It's available wherever books are sold. Today's webinar takes an exclusive focus again on the lessons accelerated by COVID-19 on the fourth industrial revolution trends. As I mentioned, what is fourth industrial revolution and how it contributed and how COVID-19 contributed back to fourth industrial revolution. So that's a relationship I wanted to bring as part of the thought leadership series. Frequently, I try to discuss about a tool that we will be using, and sometimes the thought leadership does not lend itself to using a tool. In today's webinar, I will be using a tool and discuss how that particular tool can be used as well. So COVID-19 influence on fourth industrial revolution. So first of all, we need to get ourselves level set in terms of what is the fourth industrial revolution and how COVID-19 influenced it. And one major lesson that we want to walk away with based upon all the different things that's happening at this point. So just wanted to talk about that. And this is industry agnostic. You know, it could, you don't need to be in an IT industry to apply this. It could be in any industry and you will still be able to apply these concepts here. Okay. So let's focus here on what is the lesson learned. I often go in my training, in volunteering space, in many other areas that I have an opportunity to interface with people. And I ask them like, okay, what have you learned from this global pandemic? And many times people are able to come and specifically say, oh, we learned how to work telecommute. We learned how to be more health conscious and, you know, many things of those basic stuff people are able to relate. But if I were to ask them why, you know, can you be a little bit more specific as to what is the one important lesson that you have learned at this point? Oftentimes I get this, I don't know what one specific lesson that can be consolidated from all these areas. You know, frequently a lot of different things, but if you were to consolidate all these points, what would that one be? Not necessarily everybody was able to, you know, zoom in on that particular area. So first, I wanted to level set again at this, what is lesson learned? Almost all of us have some kind of experiences in the past. And this could be pre-pandemic, It need not be associated with pandemic at all, but some kind of experience that we have. And this experience could either be positive or be negative, right? And depending upon whether it is positive or negative, these past experiences should lead us to actually incorporate certain things as part of our future. That means some actions that we will do, some behavioral adjustments that we will do. Example, if you're going on a vacation and you forget the fact that you didn't carry some important information along with you, some medicines along with you, and now you have to go and get that medicine somewhere else, or get the doctor to prescribe that medicine, or if it's an over-counter medicine, you had to buy it again. So you learned it. Now you go ahead and update a checklist or your pre-departure process to make sure that you are having that thing included. So that's the lesson learned. So you are applying the lesson learned for some future action and behavior. And this is what we are constantly coming up with. What is going to be the new normal? The new normal, if it's going to be doing exactly what we already did, then we have paid a huge price for this pandemic and haven't learned anything from it, right? So we have to think from that aspect of what is the important thing that we will do in our future actions and behaviors that we have learned from these unfortunate events that has happened. So influence from and on COVID, okay? As you are seeing, I'm changing the thought process here as to from and on COVID, okay? So first, let's talk about what is the fourth industrial revolution? What are some of the things that it talked about and how it manifested into the global megatrends. And this global megatrends is expected to be shaping up the next 10, 15 to 20 years. This came out somewhere around 2012, 13 time frame, and it got more grounded in 2014 and 15 time frame. And that is much before the pre-pandemic, right? Before this pandemic. So what are those global megatrends, and how are we actually seeing the global megatrends? And then the influence from COVID into one major lesson learned. Okay, so that's how I'm going to approach this. So for those of you that are already familiar with fourth industrial revolution, this is probably the history is going to be a little bit of a repeat. But for those of you that do not know, this will be a good one to understand. So approximately around early 1800s, we were focusing primarily on mechanization. At that point, the animal-drawn cartridges and people carrying heavy loads of water and different kinds of information or different kinds of stuff from point A to point B. So the whole idea was mechanization, like using the power of steam and water to create hydroelectric power plants and see how these things can be mechanized a little bit, right? And that was in the early 1800s. And then in late 1800, almost 80, 90 years later, it was about mass production. So we had enough vehicles created at that point with lots of experimentation. So we were focusing on just-in-time assembly and mass production in terms of how the assembly lines were constantly producing products after products after products. So more of an industrialization focus over there. And somewhere around mid-1900s, it was most about computer-based technologies around internet technology. So this is the time frame when the super large-scale integration was beginning to take place, where you are able to condense a lot of transistors into the microprocessor. More information was happening within the microprocessor with arithmetic logic unit and math processing unit and quad core processors, and more and more were actually emerging at this point to be able to use internet-based technologies to do some work. I'm sure some of you may remember this common object request broker architecture and internet-based technologies that emerged right from there, like web services. Standard operating procedures to govern those procedures in terms of how this will be done. Service-oriented architecture emerged, and many things emerged around this particular point in terms of how the internet-based technology would be used. All of us are now using those things like emails and many other things that emerge from that particular aspects. But early 2000, the cyber physical systems started coming into play, right? And this is the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution was focusing on how the human-based work will be interfacing with the computer-based work. And when I mean computer, it's not using keyboards to interface with the computer or mouse to click on different sections of the screen, but it's more about those robots and expert systems that are actually coming up with a real-time prediction of data and how that will be presented to the humans for them to continuously problem solve and things like that. So more into the cyber physical systems. Early 2000 is when things started moving on, and I'm sure most of you have heard some of these interfaces where you can open and close your garage from several miles apart using apps on your computer and things like that. You have heard a lot of those applications emerging in terms of smart home and things like that as well. So this is how the fourth industrial revolution is structured. The four industrial revolutions are structured: mechanization, mass production, internet technology, and cyber physical systems. And this was projected. If you look at the actual trends from the first to second, it took close about 80 to 90 years. And then the second to third was taking about 40 to 50 years. Now you are moving into the 2000, which is taking about 20 to 30 years, and that's how the acceleration is happening. And at that point in time, no one predicted this pandemic is going to come and hit now. And so the expectation of this early 2000 going all the way to 2030 and 2040 is changing. So new ideas are emerging as a result of this. And, it's almost like, we have hit a slow reset button so that we can actually increase the rate at which we are thinking at this point on how the cyber physical systems will move forward. So let's talk about some elements of the fourth industrial revolution space, okay? So that is supposed to be operated around 6 important principles. And this is the interoperability, virtualization, decentralization, real-time capability, service orientation, and modularity. Now, what are these? The interoperability is more of the ability of the humans and the smart components, like the cyber systems, to interface by connecting on the internet, web services, and still be able to communicate reliably. Now, the virtualization is the ability of these smart components to clone themselves, to duplicate themselves, so that those clones can analyze specific sensor data and simulate some predictive analysis and provide support. The decentralization is the ability of these cyber physical systems to make appropriate decision making. Now, the decision making is both a threat versus an opportunity space here, right? If you do something wrong, there is a lot of challenges ahead of that, and if you do something correct, and now you are in a limelight, a super shining spot, right? But the ability of the decision making has to be thought through in terms of how the computers are able to actually perform this decision making, to what extent they can perform this decision making, and when a human interface will be required for you to appropriately approve and the decisions made and things like that. And then the real-time capability. This is the ability of this cyber physical systems to collect and analyze the data, huge amounts of data, but then also provide insights immediately. So in order for a human to make a decision, if you do this, these are all the potential pathways of challenges that you have to work with. If you don't do this, these are all the potential challenges of these things that you have to work with, because a human is now forced to make a decision, but at the same time, these are providing enough arsenal for the appropriate decision making, right? And then the service orientation. This is offering the reliability of services. Whenever you are working through web services and on the web, I'm sure you are aware of all the challenges that are associated with things not working together. But you are now involving mission critical systems. So you definitely need to have some kind of a service reliability over here in terms of how those human smart component cyber systems will be able to gracefully work through the challenges ahead. And the modularity. The modularity is about the system's ability to adapt, flexibility, in fact, to adapt the individual components that make up the cyber system according to the changes in the environment. And there are multiple environments we are talking about, depending upon the space it is operating. It could be collecting environmental data and making some appropriate decisions. Or it could be collecting some information from your own human body, and then make appropriate changes in the programs that support your physiological function. So there's a lot of things that are in play over here, and these things manifest themselves, at least so far as I know, into 9 different areas that we are all talking today about, like the robotic automation, the Internet of Things, simulation, cybersecurity, systems integration, cloud computing, 3D technology, big data, augmented and virtual reality. All these 6 principles apply to all these 9 different application spaces. And I'm sure all of you know each and every one of these things. I don't need to go into the details of each and every one of these things myself. But how these things are all working together, you can't take one thing alone and say, I'm going to work only on big data alone. I'm not going to worry about these things, because when you take the big data, you are going to make sure that the systems are secure and appropriate protocols are in place so that the data is not compromised. And if you take the augmented reality, you are looking into the simulation, cloud computing, you are looking at a lot of cybersecurity again, and big data. So all these things are related. You can't come and say, I'm going to focus only on one thing, and that's the only thing that I'll focus on. There is a lot of symbiotic relationship dependencies that have to be totally understood. And if you don't understand these things, this is when challenges begin to manifest in terms of how they impact your business functionality. This is where the business continuity, disaster recovery, all those things come into play at that particular snapshot in time, how you are able to recover, right? And so the focus is on the interface. Now, when you look at the interface, what is that interface? We really have to truly understand what is that interface. And that interface is focusing on the intent. The goal should be that all these things are working together. Again, remember, the 4th industrial revolution is having those 2 parts, cyber and physical. So, there needs to be that high tech as well as high touch. I always say high touch is more important than high tech. So there are, in my humble opinion, there are 6 different pieces that come into play that defines this interface. One is going to be the people and the process. Ultimately, people are extremely important here because life lost is going to be never replaced. So human interface is extremely important, but then they have to adhere to certain processes to make sure that things are getting done correctly. And whenever there is deviation, the deviations have to be understood so that you are able to do the appropriate course corrections. And depending upon the severity of the challenge ahead of you, you probably have to do course correction faster, and you may probably have to start thinking in terms of preventive actions as well. And then you are looking at the product that you are developing, and the product that you are developing is not necessarily standing in vacuum, right? And it is part of an ecosystem. And anything that you take, for instance, your phone right now, your phone has a GPS capability. That is a product by itself. That the GPS capability alone is not standing alone. It needs to work within the ecosystem of your entire phone, right? And so now that ecosystem is going to be a program, a number of different products working together. a number of different types of programs working together. That is called the portfolio. So the idea behind project, program, portfolio management is constantly emerging because people have to think about these interfaces as part of their original product development, right? A vision for the product. And then comes into the continuous support that you are able to get, the quality of service that you are getting, and the ultimate benefit that you are deriving from that product or the ecosystem of the product that you are having in, right? And these are very important for us to understand from an interface standpoint, especially when you are using, the fourth industrial revolution spaces. And so my own definition here of this success for the cyber physical interface will only be realized if people understand the appropriate use of technology in all aspects of strategy and execution. Mark my word, strategy and execution, because if execution is not happening the way you intended to, then strategy is not good. And if you don't have a proper strategy, you are not going to execute anything clearly at all. So you really need to have something. So both these things in place. So strategy and execution implemented through product, process, program, portfolio, and people. Because ultimately people are the one that's going to implement them. And when you do this, it has to be for both outputs and outcomes. Outputs are what the project delivers. I created a new release. I created a new document. But then program outcome is making sure that that is being understood the way it was meant to be. People are using it the way it is supposed to be, and things like that. Right, so making sure that the behavioral adjustments are being done. So another simple example is the traffic lights. We all know red means stop. It's only because people do not necessarily stop, we have to come up with enforcing monitors, cameras, and fines, and things like that. So that's making sure that the outputs and outcomes are connected. That connection benefits business and society through effective and efficient management of resources and talent. Right? Mark my words again, effective and efficient, business and society, strategy and execution. So there is always this ordered path. Okay, that's my definition for how the success will manifest in terms of the cyber physical system. Okay, now in order for you to move into the fourth industrial revolution space correctly, you need to make sure that you are focusing on this interface very correctly, right? That means balancing between profit, purpose, and planet. We always talk about this, and in the absence of these things is when the ethical challenges come along. Using short-term objectives to manage the long-term goals. You need to have a long-term goal, but at the same time, you also have to have serendipity come in as a result of how the short-term things are defining the long-term goals. And also trying to train people for the skills and competencies that they need in the future, not for today, but for tomorrow. Right? So you need to plan for this. And how are these things manifesting in the organizations? And this is about the corporate social responsibility. The profit, purpose, and planet is part of that triple bottom line, in addition to the balance scorecard that people use. And the short-term objectives and managing the long-term is what the project and program delivery is all about, right? How you are constantly focusing on both the outputs and the outcomes, right? The benefits and the value through the integration of project delivery and operational excellence. And then training people for the skills needed in the future. That's about capacity and succession planning. These things are constantly being talked in companies. And oftentimes people think that, oh, these are only for large organizations like General Electric or Microsoft. No, that's not necessarily the case. Even small to medium-sized companies are already thinking about, how they will incorporate these things as part of their the core value system. Like Inflectra basically says, we are building products not for the Wall Street, but for the users. We enable second acts. So we try to come up with these kind of simple things also. regardless of the size of the organization, these things are really required for you to move from the third industrial revolution space to fourth industrial revolution space. These are very critical. Now, the pre-pandemic global megatrends that I have briefly mentioned about, and those are 6 of them, right? The globalization 2.0, environmental crisis, individualism and pluralism, digital era, multi-generational workforce, and technological convergence. I can talk about this alone in a separate webinar, but that's too long. So I'm going to, cut the important details very clearly here. Now, the globalization is 2.0 is talking more about the economic shift of power. Several years back, I was in Vietnam when I was trying to do some corporate training, and I was walking around and I saw a lot of different cuisines. In fact, in one of the malls, I saw about 40 to 50 different cuisines in their food court, and that much amount of diversity in cuisine thinking was not something that I had seen in any of the Western countries. So I made a video at that point, said how the East is becoming the new West. So the idea is much more inclusivity of diversity. Diversity is a lot more than what we all know about. So trying to understand that emotional intelligence, that cultural intelligence, and all those things, and then making decisions as part of that your organizational strategic decision making. The next one is going to be the environmental crisis. Now, firms should really rethink how operations should be performed and unlearn how product should be developed, because anything that you do is going to have some kind of an impact. Even the way the actual computer chips have to be properly discarded so that there is no digital waste. And the amount of things that we are forwarding and copying in all over the place, that comes with a cost. So the environmental crisis still has to be thought through, not just those plastics and other things, but also in other areas as well. Right. So the new normal has to be redefined for different organizations on how their operating procedures will emerge. The individualism and pluralism is making people, people of all ages, make career and life decisions not simply based upon compensation and benefits, but it is also about some societal values. I already had some people that question during the time of interview, when the employer or the hiring manager asks, do you have any questions for me? They come and ask okay, what kind of societal values do you support? What kind of corporate, social, philanthropic activities are you involved in? Do you give time off for people that will support these things? And how much time do you? These are all questions that people are already beginning to ask, right? So it's no longer just about loyalty, but also about how ethics is upheld in the organization that will govern. And the digital era is focusing about how consumers are having wide variety of options today to compare products. Now, if you want, to find out a particular product in, let's say, speech to text, you type it in the Google and you come up with a number of software, and you are able to go and go into a number of different other aggregators who compile this information. And so you have a lot more power in your hands than you had several years back. Employees are working from different parts of the world. Social media is actually redefining the boundaries of operations. So transparency and communication are becoming more and more expected of everyone in today's world, right? So it's no longer leaders will communicate, my manager will communicate, but you are actually a walking PR person about your company's products, right? And the demographic change is how different intergenerational mix along with interracial mix of people are coming together, which means lots of diversity in thinking, which could manifest as opportunities or threats, right? And so your threats or opportunity may come from within your organization, depending upon how well you are utilizing them. The technological convergence is about how different types of interfaces are coming together, as I already explained before, how all of these things are coming together, where you are able to come up with new business value propositions for the organizations, right? And we are seeing all these things already in today's space. And much of these things are even before some of the pandemic hit, like the cyber agronomy, where you are able to basically use satellites and drones to detect the quality of the soil, and to detect the quality of the fertilizers used, so that you are able to control how the food supply chain will be actually manifested. And you see this today in a number of shops, groceries, where you say organic supplies and things like that. So you are able to see how these things are already evolving. Similarly, you can use this RFID based tags to control the movement of animals, and this is important to study the natural geography of how the animals are working and things like that. And drones can be used to spread the seeds in areas of the mountains and hills that cannot be reached, to increase the greenery, forestation, not deforestation, but forestation. And patient proximity is becoming more the normal now, because previously it was controlled by many other factors, but now with this whole COVID, you definitely need to see the doctors, but then telehealth opportunities were becoming better and more increasing. Patient adherence through many devices that are emerging right now. I hear that the latest iWatch is supposed to monitor your glucose and your heart rate and things like that. So much more about patient adherence is coming with the digital space. And robotic fire services, where you are able to use the drones loaded with a lot of fire extinguishers to go and reach areas that a human cannot necessarily reach, but still be controlling those things. And first responder services. I was part of a product a long time back when you can actually use some leads to connect to an iPad and basically get your ECG, electrocardiogram. And this is very important in a first responder scenario in an ambulatory setting where the patient is non-responsive, but all you need is their fingers to get their ECG so that you can make some important decisions. Right, and the influence by COVID and the influence on this on COVID. The initial focus of the fourth industrial revolution on COVID was to how do I reduce the spread and how do I develop the vaccine. And I don't need to go into the details because for the last several years, several months, that's what we have been talking about. But what are some of those emerging trends? Just as a start, AI enables, artificial intelligence enabled drones can be used to monitor social distancing, whether we are upholding, and some similar thought process is already happening in China, where the social, similar to credit score, we are also measuring social score. Self-driving cars to deliver supplies, which will actually threaten, some of the Uber Eats and DoorDash and things like that. And robots are used for monitoring patient health at this point. Similarly, drones to spray disinfectant on public areas. Patient tracking by wearable devices, and more application suites are coming into these things. Data security and liability as a result of these things that you are exposing to. So a number of different events are already in the pipeline at this point. Okay, so COVID therefore has accelerated our understanding. So I always define this understanding as Wuka, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment, right? And oftentimes, whenever this Wuka is existing, we do two types of analysis. One is called a pest lead analysis, which stands for political screening, environmental screening, societal screening, technical screening, legal screening, ethical screening, I forgot one was that, and then demographic screening. Okay, so all these elements are part of this whole equation, right? And then the next one is going to be the TCOP, which is the technical, environmental, commercial, operational, and political aspects of it. Different people use different things. The PES lead was political, environmental, societal, technical, legal, ethical, and environmental and demographic. And now, when you take these things into a new way of looking at this, I came up with the same Wuka into different things. Like I was saying, instead of volatile, start thinking about vision. Instead of looking at uncertain, start looking at how do you understand. Instead of looking at complex, start looking at how can you help with clarity. Instead of looking at ambiguous, start looking at how you can actually improve adaptability. Right. So when you are looking at these elements of how you are applying these concepts, you are able to come into some of the lessons learned. And this takes me back to the original lessons learned that I basically mentioned before. And this is my thoughts on the COVID lessons. Okay, tools and processes. Vaccines are powerful, but masks are still required. That's what we've been hearing all along, right? So similarly, any tool that you use, tools are lifesavers, but processes are not optional. So you can't expect a tool to solve all your business problems. You need to have your business processes to make sure the right tools are used for the right purposes, right? Similarly, technology and people. Use of latest technology is essential, but mental health is more serious. The ability of people to react to these symptoms and stresses and depressions and those things are equally important. It's no longer just containing your COVID spread, but it's also more about mental health safety. So innovation experiment is mandatory, but investing in people is non-negotiable. That's when you are able to build them competencies for the future, right? And priority and communication. Everyone can't get equal treatment, but communication should be unbiased and outcome driven. And why do I say everyone can't get equal treatment? Because we had some phased approaches of how the vaccines would be distributed due to supply chain logistics, right? So people that were having some kind of a condition that required them to get the vaccine first, or seniors, and then some other age group, and then some another age group. So that's the purpose behind this. So similarly, every need can't get equal priority. In projects, people always come and say this is important, that's important. So if 5 things they are all top high priority, then there is no priority at all, right? So every need can get equal priority, but communication should be benefit oriented and value driven. Similarly, unlearning and relearning. Telehealth was already a new normal even before COVID hit, but it was not widely absorbed. At that point, it was physician-driven and patient care and for compliance. Some people chose to do it, some people did not choose to do it, right? But telecommute was already a new normal even before this COVID hit. But now is employer driven for employee productivity and cost efficiency. Pretty much all of us have shown to the world that we are still able to work from home remotely and still produce more or less the same employee productivity, which means people have to now rethink the whole operational models. So when you look at all these things, my simple connection is risk management. Are you able to truly understand what is at cost here and come up with new incremental ways of resolving these problems, right? So what is disciplined risk management? When you look at this, it's establishing rigor. First, plan for known deviation. Risk is not a bad word. So think about what could go wrong beyond functionality and monitor them for impact. But at the same time, what could you get as an opportunity? Right? Remember, risk lessons learned, positive or negative, risk, positive or negative. Similarly, address the severity, prioritize delivery, but do not ignore accidents waiting to happen. Even when you are delivering, there could be challenges that you may want to think much in advance, like deployment errors. After you deploy, making sure that there is some kind of a warranty and guarantee period where you are monitoring certain things. But you want to make sure that you are addressing severity. The longer you ignore severity, the more that becomes the priority, right? And finally, institute some amount of governance. right? Understanding dependencies across large outcomes so that you are able to go and understand voice of customer and voice of business. The longer you don't do some of those technical upgrades, you are incurring technical debt. Similarly, you can be incurring management debt, right? So how are you actually making sure that you are having decision making done? Institute some kind of a governance. Now, the stages of risk management, pretty much most of them are sure, but I wanted to make sure that it's truly understood. You plan for the risk. That doesn't mean that it's going to always happen, but you plan for the risk. And then you identify risk in a specific release, specific product, specific environment in which you are operating. Do some qualitative and quantitative analysis. At a minimum, do some qualitative analysis, which is like the high, medium, low, critical, those kind of things. In a heavy 4IR space, you will probably end up doing more quantitative analysis because the impact, the severity of the risk could be more pronounced, like a wrong decision being done. And then plan for risk responses. Like, what are the risk responses that I should think about should this happen? Right? Think much in advance. Implement the risk responses as and when they are required. That's why I marked them in red, as and when they are required. And then monitor constantly your risks. And these are part of your stages of the risk management life cycle. Okay. And different artifacts come at different points in time. But one of the important artifacts that comes at this particular point is going to be the risk register. And that risk register is looking like this. Like, on such and such a day, risk was identified. This was relating to people category or business category. The risk is this, and the probability was this. Now I'm using a qualitative analysis here. Like, how high is high? I haven't defined it. How low is low? I haven't defined it. Where does medium fit in? I haven't defined it. But it's at least giving me where I should focus my energy on, and what is the current status of that, and whether it is assigned to a proper owner so that that owner can come up with appropriate resolution steps. So you are able to track these kind of things. This is a simple example of a risk register. So my thought process is the fourth industrial revolution truly had a lot of information that focused primarily on risk management. And COVID was also a lot more about how to control these risks. And together they helped each other out. And I want to introduce Spira Plan Risk Management module at this point. And this is the demo part that I'm going to be talking about. So let me switch over to my screen here. Hang on one second. Okay, I hope everyone is able to see my screen. I just confirmed it. Very good. So now I am in Spira Plan. This is on my cloud instance. Inflectra provides 3 different editions of Spira: Spira Test, Spira Team, Spira Plan. The risk module is part of the Spira Plan because it's part of ecosystem for projects, programs, portfolios, and enterprise-wide. So now when you are in this project, you are able to see the enterprise level information here. You can go down one level and basically start looking at so all the different things at the enterprise level I'm able to see here. I can drill down into specific projects or specific projects that are part of a program and find out what's going on over there, why it's happening, and things like that. I can do the same thing at program level here and pick up specific programs and what are the constituting project that is made up of that particular program and deal more about that. But now I'm going to go into a specific project for now. So let's create a project here for real quick. So I'm going to create a product. Okay, demo project. Okay, I will leave everything here as is. I'm not going into the details of the product itself, but you understand the logic behind this. Let me make sure that I add myself as a user. Okay, I am already a product owner. Very good. Now let's go into the requirements. Let's think of this demo project as maybe vaccine distribution. Okay, vaccine distribution. So some of the requirements could be develop vaccine, develop distribution channels, Okay, and then let's maybe insert another one. Distribute vaccine. Okay, so I have created just two quick requirements for now at this point. Let's add maybe one more one. Develop channels. Okay. Okay. All right, so I have created this for now. So let's go ahead and look at these distribute vaccine or develop channels. So for instance, distribute vaccine, I'm taking randomly here. So distribute vaccine, now this is going to be our basic requirement as to how you are going to distribute the vaccine. Now, when you think about this distribution, what are some of the things you can think of? An example of a risk here is the supply chain vendor that you are working with is not compliant with the HIPAA requirements. So that is a risk, right? So you can capture those kind of risk over here. So if I go into the risk module here, I can start adding some risks here. Okay, so now I'm going to basically come back and say vendor is not HIPAA compliant with that's it. The systems, I can add more details. So now, what is the level of probability here? So I'm using certain things already here. These things can be controlled. These things can be controlled in the risk statuses here. So you can come back here and say the probability, likely, possible, and all those things can be controlled in different aspects here. So for instance, let me say, this is the status, and this is the type, this is the probability, this is the impact. All these things are defined here. So you can see the status, the type, the probability, impact, and you can also add some custom properties if you are using, let's say, failure mode effect analysis and you want to include a detectability, you can do that too. So you can basically come here and say, I'm using default information here. This is probably not certain, but potentially possible. But if that is going to happen, then the impact is going to be catastrophic because now challenges come up to this thing. So these things, it uses the numerical value of these things to compute the exposure. So this is now risk exposure is 12. So let's add one more thing over here. And that's going to be, let me add one more risk. And that's going to be all drivers that are using to distribute the vaccine should be going through some kind of a clearance. Okay, and let's say that clearance is not foolproof and it's not working. So drivers are not verified correctly by the compliance system because the compliance system was fault. And okay, we didn't know about that, but we are using the compliance system. But as a result of that, assumption is the root of evil, and so we are having the challenge. Now, for this, it could be associated with let's say this is somewhat likely because you had a feeling that this is not going to be a good system. You're just prototyping something or human intervention is required. And if this happens, the impact is going to be catastrophic. Now, as soon as you do this, the risk exposure code changes, to be very high. Okay, so now you have created two important risks, and you have to associate with those to the requirements. So now you can go and say, I'm going to do in two different aspects. So I can go into the association here, click on the add, and if I select the artifact type, the requirement comes. So these are the two things that I created, and these two things are supposed to be associated with development distribute vaccine. Okay, so now I can come back here and say this is associated. Similarly, I can go into the requirement one and go to the distribute vaccine, Now, if you go into the association, you will see the risk is already linked. So I'm able to establish that bidirectional work. And you don't need to be in the risk to do this. You can also do this from the requirement as well. So you can come here and say, I want to associate the risks. So the other risk that you had created, which is not already linked, is showing up here. You can come here and say this is linked. So both the risks that I created are now associated with that one requirement. So you see, you can build these things. Now, the beauty of these things, let's take a look at the drivers are not verified by the compliance system. Excuse me. So now there is also this mitigation here, right? So if you look at this, you can add some more description here. In this mitigation, you can basically come and say, okay, I'm going to have the compliance system verification. So have an auditor verify the compliant system, whatever that application is, and things like that. So you can basically say, I would like to review this on such and such a date. Okay. And if you want, you can add a owner also here. You can add custom properties here. I've not done that. So you can come here and do this. And now that one is done. Now I can come back here and add another one. So maybe you can have multiple steps to address this challenge, this risk. So another one would be institute a manual process in addition to the compliance system for assigning drivers. Okay, so that will be required by every time you are doing it, but at least you are creating a process and making sure that the process is understood, and now you are associating these risk mitigation steps. So you have done these kind of things very quickly here, and you are able to show that requirements are related to risks and there are mitigations available within the risk itself and that you can monitor. So you can see the stages that I talked about coming through very clearly. And the reason why I chose this particular type of a project, which is develop and distribute vaccines, is primarily to make people understand that anytime you are looking at application lifecycle management, it does not necessarily mean that it has to be software driven. It could also be applied for HR practices, legal practices, hiring and determining benefits, and many other systems that are not necessarily related to IT can also be done. Okay, software development project can also be done here. Now, when I go into the project space over here, the more like the project dashboard, you look here, the information comes up over here. So in the risk summary, things are showing up right over here. And this tells me how many risks are here. So I created, two different categories of risks. And so with assigned different probability and severity rating. So, one is coming here, one is coming here. Remember the 12 and 16. So it's coming over here and it says like, okay, this is most likely to happen, which means this is a higher likelihood of happening. And if it happens, it's going to be a challenge. So this is what you want to focus more on. And this is not less important, but this is equally important as well. But let's say something you had identified as negligible and very rare happening, an accident happening in the highway. Well, it's not negligible, but at the same time, because you have verified the drivers and you have policies that basically say the driver can only drive for 5-6 hours, and many other policies are being upheld, or 2 drivers are present, and you're constantly monitoring them, and so many other systems that you have placed, it's unlikely, and the effect is marginal. In that case, you don't need to necessarily spend too much time on this, but you need to spend more time on this. So it gives you that kind of a purview, and it also helps you understand what are the risks that are not yet closed. And when you are monitoring these things, the probability or severity rating can go down, because you can most likely never ever completely eliminate all risks. Some risks are always residual, there are always big percent, but you are still able to find out what is the challenge. And if you create a risk, you can also make another risk depending upon this, because for instance, if vendor is not HIPAA compliant, and as a result of that risk, if you are having another risk coming up, that's called a secondary risk, you can then associate the risk with another risk, and you can monitor these things as well. So this is a very good way of you trying to understand how Spira Plan risk module can be used to address some of these challenges. And we have used Spira Plan in the life sciences and medical pharmaceutical space as well for a number of our clients. So that brings us close to our presentation at this point. So let me switch back to the presentation. Okay, I got the presentation back. So at this point, my summary is the fourth industrial revolution has its core in the use of both technical, which is the cyber, and human interface. My own vision here is that based upon the lessons that we have learned, risk management discipline will become cross-functional. It will no longer be isolated to one particular person alone, or one particular domain group alone, or one particular profession alone. Like the popular saying goes in the airport and public places, like if you see it, say it, this is going to be expected of everybody. Risk management will be enterprise-wide, impacting all roles as a result. Everybody is equally held accountable in the way we are delivering stuff. Project management will be centered on risk, which is how the program and portfolio and the enterprise level risk registers will be administered and monitored and managed. And that's how I'm envisioning these things happening, because risk is going to be the single thread that connects all the different application spaces and all the different 4IR principles. Please let me know if you have any questions at this point. If there are anything relating to the course administration, please reach out to marketing@inflectra.com for Ms. Tia. Or if you have any questions on the actual content I delivered, please send an email to support@inflectra.com. But please tag your question with the webinar title from me, Dr. Sriram Rajagopalan. If there are no questions, I wish you all well. Please stay safe and healthy, and look forward to the next presentation that will be coming up. Please share your feedback. It will be very helpful for us to know how these things are helping you. And it will be good to have some feedback coming to me as well. Thank you very much. I wish you all good health and good safety. Thanks. Bye-bye.